Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 9. Today we'll be talking about Stanley Kubrick's ninth feature film, A Clockwork Orange, which came out in 1971 and was based on the 1962 novel by Anthony Burgess. I have read the book before, but in this video I'm just going to be talking about the movie. I could maybe do a book versus movie type video on this in the future, but I would have to give this a reread. So for now, we're just talking about this. Like a number of Kubrick's other movies, this was included in the US's National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. Of all of Kubrick's movies, Clockwork Orange has so far taken the longest to make it into that US Film Registry. It came out in 1971 and was inducted only as recently as 2020. A Clockwork Orange is definitely one of Kubrick's most intense films. Just from the first few minutes, it really just grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. Everything is crazy about this movie, from the subject matter to the acting to the imagery. Feels like listening to White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground. It's got that punk rock intense energy throughout the whole thing. The gritty and in-your-face style of A Clockwork Orange is made even more striking if, like me, you're watching through all of Kubrick's films one after the other. This movie is in heavy contrast with his previous film, 2001: A Space Odyssey. 2001 was so big budget and clean and minimal and slowly paced, and I think the contrast between the look and feel of these two films is in part due to their budgets. In 1968, 2001's budget was $10.5 million, which this inflation calculator tells me would be over $96 million today. Compare that to Clockwork Orange, which in 1971 had a budget of $1.3 million, which today would only be about $10.2 million. So at least as far as the budget's concerned, this is Kubrick going back to a much more low-scale indie type of production. So, what is this about? A Clockwork Orange tells the story of Alex. There he is on the cover. In the book, he's just known as Alex, but in this movie, they gave him a last name. It's Alex DeLarge. Later in the movie, there's some newspaper articles about Alex's crime where they list his name as Alex Burgess as a nod to the book's author, Anthony Burgess. Whatever you think his last name is, Alex is the main consistent name for this character. Another quick biographical note about the character Alex is that in the book, he's supposed to be 15 years old, but if you've seen this movie, he's not 15. Kubrick has raised the age of his characters from book to movie before, most notably in Lolita. In both cases, I think the reason for the ages being raised from book to movie was for censorship and just general taste issues. It's one thing to read it in a book, but it's another thing to see it on the big screen. So I think it's just easier for everyone in general to see slightly older versions of Alex and Lolita doing what they do on the big screen. Imagine if in both movies they were the exact age portrayed in the book. That'd be a little weird. Alex is a hooligan of the highest order. He's the leader of his group of friends called Droogs, and the Droogs are a gaggle of no-goodniks who run around causing chaos and destruction and doing nothing helpful for society. They describe their activities as engaging in a bit of the old ultraviolence, which really just means beating the shit out of random people for no reason. You may have noticed already that this movie has a lot of unique terms, like droogs and ultraviolence. Alex and the Droogs speak what is known as nadsat. This is a slang language way of speaking that Anthony Burgess made up, and it's a combination of English, Cockney slang, and Slavic languages. The author did this because he felt that everyday youth slang is always constantly evolving and changing, and he didn't want to date the novel by using slang terms from his current period when he wrote it. One night, Alex and the Droogs take their ultraviolence a bit too far. I think they were just roughing her up for fun, but she ultimately ended up dying as a result of the attack. When Alex hears the sirens, he starts to flee, but one of the other Droogs smashes him in the head with a bottle, knocks him out, and all the other Droogs take off. While the police show up, Alex is still there. He is caught and captured, and he is sentenced to 14 years in prison. 2 years into Alex's prison sentence, he agrees to undergo what is called the Ludovico technique, which is this extreme and experimental form of aversion therapy run by the government, which is meant to rid him of his criminal urges. When Alex completes the Ludovico technique, he has a nauseatingly extreme aversion to any of his old forms of ultraviolence, and for better or worse, is a shell of his former self. In the story universe, in theory, the Ludovico technique's purpose was to generally reduce the amount of crime from all these violent youth gangs running around. However, the Ludovico technique goes to such an extreme length that it's to the point where Alex can't even defend himself when he's attacked. This, of course, brings up some of the biggest philosophical questions in the movie, whether or not Alex actually has free will anymore, and whether or not he can actually be a good person if he can't even make the choice to do wrong. After Alex completes the Ludovico technique and is released from prison, he is haunted mentally, spiritually, and physically by the ghosts of his former life. So in one sense, karma is catching up to Alex and he's reaping what he sowed. He's no longer welcome at home, as his parents have rented out his bedroom to someone else. The old random guy that him and the Droogs beat up towards the beginning of the movie recognizes him, and his gang of other old drunk guys beats the crap out of Alex. And then 2 policemen come by to help Alex as he's being beaten up, but those 2 policemen are actually 2 of Alex's old Droog buddies who are now cops, and they are exceptionally cruel to him. They beat the crap out of him and they leave him broken and alone in the woods. Alex stumbles to this house for help, but it's owned by one of the guys that he did his ultra-violence to in his former life. This guy tortures Alex and drives him mad to the point where he tries to end it all by jumping out the window. Alex wakes up in a hospital room where members of the government and his parents come by and apologize for what they have done to him, and he no longer has a nauseating aversion to sex and violence. We've come full circle. So let's talk about this movie's legacy and influence. The word iconic gets thrown around a lot, but I definitely think it applies to this movie. Even if you've never read the book or watched this movie, you definitely know something about this or have heard of it, or some of this imagery you've just seen elsewhere in pop culture. There are many, many references to Clockwork Orange throughout various other pieces of pop culture. In fact, there's a whole Wikipedia page just on things that reference Clockwork Orange. So in Tenacious D, in the Pick of Destiny movie, there's a scene where Jack Black's character gets beaten up by a group of baddies dressed like the Droogs from Clockwork Orange. The house from the first Hellraiser movie was on Ludovico Street, which is obviously a reference to the Ludovico technique from this movie. The infamous torture scene in Reservoir Dogs where Mr. Blonde dances around a stuck in the middle with you and cuts off that guy's ear. That was described by Quentin Tarantino as a direct reference to the scene in Clockwork Orange where Alex beats up that writer guy and sings Singin' in the Rain. I also read that the slow motion walk the guys do at the beginning of Reservoir Dogs was supposed to be a reference to that cool slow motion walk they do in Clockwork Orange, but I'm on the fence about that one. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Could just be a cool slow motion walk. As we know from the Chappelle Show, everything looks better in slow motion. In the Hannibal show, in the 5th episode of its 3rd season, when Morpheus gets into a fight with Hannibal, the same section of, I'm going to mess up this name, Gioacchino Rossini's The Thieving Magpie, as was used in the Clockwork Orange movie, plays while the 2 characters are fighting. The show's creator, Brian Fuller, said in a tweet that this scene was a full-on homage to Clockwork Orange. There was this 2010 South Park episode that did a big homage to Clockwork Orange. It's, that same slow motion walk scene where Cartman then beats up the rest of the guys a similar way to Alex beat up the rest of his Droogs. My favorite little fact that I found out while looking at films that referenced Clockwork Orange was actually the recent movie, which was pretty bad, Space Jam 2. So there was apparently a mild controversy around this, and it's pretty stupid. Check it out. So Space Jam 2 is a family movie, and yet some of the background characters were dressed as Droogs. So the controversy comes from the fact that not only were the Droogs included, but the classic character Pepe Le Pew was removed from the final film for being too edgy and suggestive, or as this article calls it, he added to rape culture. Okay, fine, if you want to remove the cartoon skunk from your movie, that's your right, it's your movie, whatever. If you're talking about the issue of him adding to rape culture, why keep the Droogs in here? I mean, come on, let's at least be consistent. A Clockwork Orange has also had a big influence in the world of music. One of my favorite bands, New Order, named one of their songs Ultraviolence from their 1983 album Power, Corruption, and Lies. The Arctic Monkeys' 2011 album called Suck It and See is named after the graffiti in Alex's apartment building and is also seemingly a reference to the Peel Slowly and See label on the Velvet Underground's first album. David Bowie is a big Clockwork Orange fan. His song Suffragette City contains the lyric "Droogie don't crash here," and the song Girl Loves Me from his 2016 final album Black Star is written largely in the NADSAT speak that everyone uses in the movie. Another interesting thing I found was that apparently one of my favorite classic rock bands, Pink Floyd, denied Stanley Kubrick the right to use their song Atom Heart Mother in the Clockwork Orange movie. And once I read that, I could totally picture that song working at various points in this movie. It's got this very unique British kind of sound to it that would fit this English dystopian hellscape. And if anyone's interested, someone on YouTube actually already made that edit, so I'll put a link to that in the description. I think it fits pretty well. And interestingly, that Pink Floyd album Atom Heart Mother can be seen in the record store scene along with the Beatles' Magic Mystery Tour. And in possibly my strangest entry in Clockwork Orange's larger cultural influence, we have Princeton University's Ultimate Frisbee team, which is named Clockwork Orange. That is their men's Ultimate Frisbee team. Their women's Ultimate Frisbee team is called Lady Clockwork. Quick tangent, Ultimate Frisbee was created by New Jersey native big-time movie producer Joel Silver, who's known for creating such franchises as Lethal Weapon, Die Hard, and the Matrix series. The more you know. The next section is I'd like to talk about this film's visual style. I think this is one of the most visually interesting films that Kubrick has done. The sets, the costumes, the camera angles, there's so much to take note of in this movie. Right from the beginning with the Malaco milk bar shot, to the scene where they're beating up the old drunk guy, to the record store, to the Ludovico technique, there's just so many cool and iconic shots throughout this movie. Just talking about the visuals in an overall sense, I do think this is one of the most stylized movies that Kubrick has made. It shows this weird dystopian, futuristic, dark, fantastical world that is obviously not the real world we're currently living in. There's also a handful of quick cut type shots that show Alex's dreams and fantasies. I really like the ones of Vampire Alex, they're pretty cool. All the visuals in the torture scenes stand out and are memorable for me, although I do think the compilation of clips and that music goes on for a little too long. After a point, I kind of get it. You don't have to keep going with that. There's also a number of moments of visual cleverness that don't reveal themselves on your first watch. For example, I like the clever placement of the snake against Alex's bedroom wall art, or how they make the family's new house guest, George, kind of look like Alex, so it's literally a replacement for him. Besides being very intense and disturbing at times, this movie can also be very funny. There's a number of shots and choices that are just hilarious to me. The shot of when the old writer guy is remembering who Alex is hilarious. I was laughing my butt off when I watched this again. And later on, when Alex is injured and chewing and this guy is feeding him, I just love the faces he makes. It's funny and kind of sad to me that they wanted a futuristic dystopian hellscape for this movie, and some of these places that they shot, some of those memorable locations in this movie were actual just places in 1970s England. I guess 1970s England was just that much of a dystopian hellscape. I like this movie. I get the interesting philosophical questions about free will that it raises. I understand that it's a hugely influential film and had a big impact on pop culture in general. However, there is something about it that I don't personally connect with as much as Kubrick's other films. I don't know exactly what that is. Just speaking for myself, it's not my favorite Kubrick movie. I know a lot of people like it though. In a film history sense, I get that it's an objectively important film. Lots of people like it. Most would put it among the best Kubrick films. So in that sense, if you're asking me, then yes, I'd say this is essential Stanley Kubrick viewing. But I never find myself just sitting down to watch it for fun. And this will sound really stupid, but after a point, this movie just feels like a bunch of British people yelling at me. One of the best aspects of the movie to me is the philosophy and the interesting questions about free will and society and institutions that it raises. One of the big messages in the movie that I thought was conveyed pretty well was that they're trying to show that the government and societal institutions in general, used by both the right and the left, can be just as evil as the droogs themselves. The first third of the movie had me thinking, hey, this Alex guy is kind of an asshole. But the second and third thirds of the movie had me thinking, all these other people are just pure evil. They're just savages. They're like worse than him. One of the things I think the movie showed well is that, yes, Alex can be a pretty evil guy, but so can the government and society and the institutions and everyone else around him. They can be just as evil as him, but in their own way. It's kind of scary to me how in the movie society and the government just change like the wind. At one point, they're all after Alex, and by the end of the movie, they all come to his bedside and are all apologizing, and they all really just want to use him as a pawn for their own political gain. Alex tries to go home, but his parents have kicked him out, and then by the end of the movie, they come over and they're apologizing for everything that they've done. It's the same with the government in this movie. You think the state and the government are there to protect you, and in a sense, they are, but in another sense, they'll also destroy this kid's soul in the name of quote-unquote justice, making him not much more than a moral robot instead of a human. That's actually what the title of the story, A Clockwork Orange, refers to. Imagine an orange, something organic, but on the inside, it's like the gears of a clock, something not organic. You know, it's not literal gears of a clock inside him, but he's like a robot in a moral sense. He's not a human being. If he can't choose to do bad, then how can you say he's good? He physically cannot do a bad thing, and you can't sit there and say, oh, look at him behaving so well. He has no choice. You've taken his agency away. That's the whole point of the story. The whole middle portion of the movie, the whole second act when Alex is in jail and undergoing the Ludovico technique, is not my favorite portion of the movie. I think one of the things I'm not too crazy about in the second act is how clearly they spell out the moral conflict for the audience. The guy from the state says, look, he's been cured. And then the priest comes out and says, but how can he be good if he can't make a choice? And after seeing this once, I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't have to have these two guys come out and just say, side A, side B, what do we do? Another aspect of this movie that I really like is just this general rebellious punk, fuck you, anti-establishment kind of feeling that goes on throughout the whole movie. I think the rebellious, gritty punk rock nature of the movie is one of the reasons it is so influential, not just in the film world, but also in the world of music. Next section, as always, I like to share some of my random thoughts I had while I was watching this movie. So, first off, one of the first places I ever saw the star of Clockwork Orange was in the early South Park episode where he gave this classic introduction.
Ah, Dickens. The imagery of cobblestone streets, craggy London buildings, and nutmeg-filled Yorkshire puddings. Hello, I'm a British person.
Speaking of Malcolm McDowell, damn, he really committed to this role. Especially in moments like this where he drops his drawers and the policeman looks up his, you know what? That is the commitment of a true thespian right there. Look at that commitment to that role. Look at that. Now, I hope this doesn't come across as an insult. I don't mean it to, but at first glance, I thought this nurse was Malcolm McDowell wearing a costume. Another cool thing I found out was that one of the movie's most iconic moments where Alex is beating up those people and singing in the Rain, that was actually an improvisation by Malcolm McDowell. That wasn't written in the script. Kubrick told him to sing and dance, and that was the only song he could think of the lyrics to at the moment. This buff, Austin Powers looking guy here is named David Prowse, and he played Darth Vader in the original Star Wars films. Mind you, he was not Darth Vader's voice, that was obviously James Earl Jones, but Prowse was the actual guy in the Darth Vader suit. They used his large frame to help make the villain more intimidating. Now, if you've already seen the movie Dr. Strangelove, or have seen my Kubrick Quest episode on it, you may already know that James Earl Jones, one of his first acting roles was in Dr. Strangelove. And it's interesting to note that both the body and voice of Darth Vader had some of their earliest roles in Kubrick's films. Apparently, the doctor giving Alex eye drops during the Ludovico technique was an actual doctor giving Malcolm McDowell eye drops so his eyes wouldn't dry out while Kubrick shot his 9 million takes. The truant officer guy seems like such a cartoon character to me.
Alec, boy, awake at last, yes? I met your mother on the way to work, yes?
Also, speaking of the truant officer character, it also always catches me off guard when he just whacks Alex in the balls. This next bit of trivia random thought is fairly well known, but if you didn't know, in the record shop scene, look here, you can actually see the vinyl soundtrack for 2001: A Space Odyssey. There's only a handful of these type of in-jokes in Kubrick's filmography, and this is one of the most notable examples. When Alex is being checked in and admitted to prison, why in the world does Alex have so much crap in his pockets?
1 half bar of chocolate, 1 bunch of keys, 1 packet of cigarettes, 2 plastic ball pens, 1 pocket comb, address book, 1 10-penny piece, 1 white metal wristlet watch.
Last random thought I want to share. I had no idea about this, but apparently Stanley Kubrick's adaptation of Clockwork Orange is not the first film adaptation of Clockwork Orange. The artist Andy Warhol did his own adaptation of Clockwork Orange in 1965. It's a movie called Vinyl, and it features some of the regulars around his factory scene like Edie Sedgwick or Ondine or Gerard Malanga. Warhol's version is a very loose adaptation of the story. I think by all objective measures, this is the better film. When people think Clockwork Orange, the movie, they don't look towards Vinyl. I mean, well, it's not even called Clockwork Orange. It's a very, very loose adaptation. If you've seen any other of Andy Warhol's movies, you kind of know what you're in for. That is about all I've got for today. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate you sticking around till the end, as always, and I will see you on the next episode of Kubrick Quest. Goodbye.